Yeah, sure. All right. Well, hello everyone and welcome. Today is the fourth webinar in a five-part series. Oh, is that right? We already had four of these? Uh,
This is going to be the fourth.
okay. Yep. This one is the fourth in a five-part series, and this one's called Regulations and Legal Issues. Our guest speaker today is none other than one of the founding fathers of the Arkansas District Export Council, our friend Mr. Graham Catlett of the Catlett Law Firm. My name is Jonathan Bricker, and I'm the chair of the Arkansas District Export Council. In my primary role, I work for Regions Bank, and I'm located in Rogers, Arkansas. I want to begin today by thanking our sponsors, Arkansas Manufacturing Solutions and Arkansas Workforce Connections. Their sponsorship and partnership throughout the year are what makes these webinars so successful, and we're able to offer them free of charge. So thank you to both of those sponsors. I really appreciate you all joining us today. For those that aren't quite sure who the deck is and what we do, allow me to make a quick introduction. We're a private, nonprofit organization that brings together experienced international business people with potential exporters. Each deck member has been appointed by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce for their real-world expertise in international trade. We have a ton of experience within the council and in many different sectors. Now, having said that, doesn't mean that we have all the answers to every question, but we can introduce you to someone who does. We're a community of connections within the exporting world, and we want to be your strategic partner and help you grow your bottom line. My hope for the day is that you walk away from this webinar with more confidence in your exporting abilities. And if you have any questions throughout the webinar and you don't feel comfortable asking them here, I invite you to reach out to us on our website, exportarkansas.org, and we'll have one of our members reach out to you. There you can also sign up for our monthly newsletter, which is chock full of pertinent international news and trade show opportunities. These classes are designed to generate questions as you work through what it takes to be successful in sending your product or a service overseas. They're meant to be a very high-level overview of some important parts of becoming exporters. Then, as you're ready to take that next step or just jump right in, the deck will be there to help you any way that we possibly can. So before we begin, I'd like to ask everyone to keep themselves muted and raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, or simply put it there in the chat. That way we don't have any background noise interrupting our speakers. And I appreciate everyone's help with that. I'd like to introduce everyone to your moderator today, Mr. Rudy Ortiz. Rudy is the owner of Strategic Business Services, LLC, where he helps companies with a wide variety of international business and exporting needs. Rudy works alongside companies entering new markets and is a U.S. partner of Global Market Entry Consultants, which is a group of experts that are located in 32 countries. He has an MBA in international business. He is a certified global professional. So for these reasons, he is the DEX Education Chair. Rudy, thanks so much for all you do.
Jonathan, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. As Jonathan kind of alluded to a little bit ago, today's class is the number four class out of a series of five classes, and these classes are kind of geared to helping people that perhaps have somewhat limited experience with exporting and perhaps are not experts in any of the different areas that really need to be considered when you're exporting. Having said that, we've had a lot of companies who are big exporters of they're exporting to 40 plus countries, and they have found these classes to be useful for them as well. So there's a lot to be had because of the kind of expertise that we have in presenters like today's Mr. Graham. Graham, as Jonathan was alluded to, is someone who has been with the deck for a long time. As a matter of fact, Graham, I think you've been the chair of the deck at least a couple of times, right?
At least once.
Yeah. And so he has been a real stalwart in helping the different kinds of exporters in Arkansas to help them with a wide variety of things. He's an international attorney by trade, but probably just as important, if not more important, is that he is also an exporter. As a matter of fact, he has the distinction of being, I think, the first person to import American food products into the former Soviet Union, and believe me, that is no small undertaking. And he was very successful at doing that, and continues to export and do international business. So not only does he know the law, which is of course very, very valuable, but he understands what it's like to really be an exporter and the different things that you have to take into consideration to do it well. And so, Graham, with that, let's go ahead and let you um, go to your slides.
Thank you, Rudy. Let me see if I can get this
Yeah.
set up. Good. How's that?
Excellent.
Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to be with all of you today. And let me give you a couple of housekeeping points before we get started. First, you're welcome to interrupt me at any time. And if you don't do it orally, then you can send a message. And I think somebody's watching the chat. But if you'd like to ask questions afterwards, please feel free to email me, because I feel that part of my role with the deck is to help people with their questions. And so, of course, without charge, I'm happy to answer questions to the extent that I can by email. I plan to talk about some of the legal issues relating to exporting, and I have organized them in priority of how I think they affect most Arkansas exporters. And so I hope that as we go through the first points, you'll see that they are the most important. And then there'll be a host of other issues toward the end that I suggest you just use as a checklist so that you can determine whether they apply to you when you're doing your export. And so the first issue that I want to talk about is the one that has been on our minds all year, and that is tariffs. Tariffs have been very disruptive to small business, especially, and we are going to continue to enjoy that disruption for some time. You know, the principal scheme of tariffs has been with us for several decades, and it resulted in an overall import tariff of around 2 to 3%. Well, the tariffs this year have increased those average tariffs up to around 16%. And that has, of course, caused some consternation, particularly with small business. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The effect for the rest of this year is uncertain about tariffs, because the legal justification that the administration has used to impose those tariffs is now pending before the United States Supreme Court. Lower courts have already held that they are illegal and must be completely terminated, but we don't know what the United States Supreme Court will say, and we expect a ruling probably within the next month. Now, even if the Supreme Court says that the current justification for the tariffs is illegal, that doesn't mean that the tariffs will go away, because the administration may reimpose virtually the same tariffs using some other legal basis. And as we've seen this year, it takes about 6 months to wind its way through the court system. So I think for your planning purposes, you should assume that the tariffs are going to be with us for some time. I want to tell you the order in which I plan to talk about things. And the first is to determine how best to manage legal risk for an exporter. Then we'll talk about different models of selling your products abroad. Export sales contracts, I'll go into those important provisions and lesser important provisions with you. Distribution contracts, then export regulations, and the myriad list of foreign regulations and trade barriers that occur, and then finally, trade agreements. Now, in somewhat of a humorous but also serious way, I've made a list of how best to manage your legal risk as an exporter. Now, as I go down this list, you'll notice that some of this seems impossible for you to completely comply with, but that's okay. That's the purpose of the list. The reason for the list is for you to try to minimize and manage your risk by accomplishing as many of these as you can. And to the extent that you cannot satisfy one, then you should focus on it, because you need to realize that there is some risk in it. Now, the first one, for instance, says sell direct, to make a takeoff on the old American Express advertisement. Never leave home. And what that means is that once you leave home, you incur some risk that you may not have if you are selling from home. And those risks include whether the other country will determine that you should be using a special visa to do business, whether you need to pay an income tax in that location, or whether there are some other restrictions or rules of that country that could apply to you. None of that will happen if you sell direct, never leaving home. The second says to sell only to good folks from a good place. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you don't sell to good folks from a good place, then you might not get paid, or you may incur other problems relating to the place or the folks who you're selling to. And so if you have questions about the buyer or the country in which your goods are destined, then you should pay particular attention to what it means to sell to those people and in that place. But again, if you sell only to good folks in a good place, then it's not going to affect you. The third is probably one of the more important things, and that's how to get paid. Well, the best way is to have your buyer prepay you in full. Now, that's not always possible, obviously, but a confirmed letter of credit or an insured receivable are alternative ways to help you manage that risk. Fourth is to sell ex works. And what that means under the Incoterms is that risk of loss shifts when the products leave your dock. Possession shifts, of course, when the products leave your dock. And title transfer shifts at your dock. And so all of those help mitigate your risk in case something happens to the products once they leave your dock. So the form of ex works minimizes and helps you manage your risks. The next issue is about warranties. You know, what happens if it breaks after it leaves your dock? Are you going to be responsible for it while it's in transit? Or even worse, when it's already at the buyer's warehouse or place of business someplace abroad? Those are complicated issues. Again, I suggest that if you can, disclaim warranties or sell with no warranty at all so that is not a risk. The next item has to do with bribes. We'll talk a little bit later in the session about the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, but it is common in some locations for simple or expensive bribes to be given. Well, under U.S. law, it can be a violation of U.S. law in addition to being a violation of the law of the country in which you're committing the bribe. Now, not all transfers are illegal bribes, but a lot are. And so the safest thing is not to bribe anybody for anything. Next item is what law applies. Well, the safest thing for us is to provide that our state law here in Arkansas or whatever state you're in, using a uniform commercial code based contract, is the law that is going to apply to the contract. Because once you get outside the United States, there is a chance that the law of some other country or of a treaty will apply to your transaction, and that makes it more expensive and complicated for you to deal with. Finally, where are disputes going to be resolved? And the best and cheapest for you is to have them arbitrated here in your own state rather than abroad. So as I say, that is a checklist of things that would help you manage your legal risks. And of course, we realize that they're not all possible, but to the extent one or more are not possible, then you should focus on that. But if you get all those done, then you have done the best you can in managing your risk. The next topic is what models should you use for exporting? A very common one for beginning exporters is to sell directly from the United States. You know, all you need is a internet and a FedEx account, and you can be an exporter. And that's how a lot of people get started. And I urge you to consider that way as a beginning. But there's also things that are a little more complicated, and that is establishing an agent or a distributor. And if you want to get more complicated than those two, then you may want to set up a representative office or a wholly owned subsidiary abroad. There are complications, but also advantages, particularly to providing better sales and service to the customer by having those last three in particular. Finally, if you really want to get involved with distributing in a foreign country, then having a joint venture, a partnership, or some kind of a shared ownership is something you should consider. Now let me talk about sales contracts. And I'm going to first go through what I consider to be essential terms of a sales contract, and then others that are not so essential. As far as the essential terms, the first is payment. And when you're discussing payment in your contract, you need to consider different aspects of payment. First is the timing. You know, when is it going to be paid? Is it going to be paid all in advance, or is it going to be, is the price going to be paid part now and part later? The second aspects of payment are the methods of payment. You know, how are you going to receive that payment? Is it going to be cash or wire transfer? Or are you going to use credit cards, which is problematic in some cases? Will you secure that payment or part of it with a letter of credit or an open account? We have government insurance through Ex-Im Bank or the Small Business Administration, or private insurance. But all of those are aspects of payment that need to be in your contract. The next essential term is a detailed description of your goods. And it's very important that you be very detailed. I've seen some commodity descriptions that run 2 or 3 or 4 pages. Most packaged manufactured goods are much more succinct in their description, but still it's important to describe the quality and quantity very precisely, and to consider what's going to happen if the quality or the quantity that was in the contract is not what was finally delivered to the customer. And at what point in time is the quality and quantity going to be determined? Is it going to be at the time of shipment or the time of receipt? And obviously there's a big difference. Next essential term is the delivery date. What happens if the products are delivered early or late? Generally, there are going to be charges that will accrue in either of those instances. And so you need to think about how and who is going to pay those charges. And of course, it depends on the cause of the early or late delivery. But still, it is an issue you should think through. Finally, I mentioned a minute ago about delivery method. And there is such a thing, you're probably all already familiar with it, called Incoterms. And the Incoterms is a list of terms that primarily provide for the transfer of possession, title, and risk of loss. Incoterms do not constitute a contract. They are incorporated into your contract. And anybody using Incoterms should buy the ICC book, International Chamber of Commerce book, because it will detail a lot more of the rules and meaning of Incoterms than just the short expression that many of us are familiar with. And let me say that if you're not real familiar with Incoterms, you may be familiar with some of the shorthand abbreviations, but that abbreviation incorporates about 2 to 3 pages of details into your contract if you use it. So just saying that you want to sell X Works, and you may think you know what X Works means, I can tell you that you may not. And this book will show you the 2 pages of implied terms that impose obligations on the buyer and on the seller if you use something as simple as X Works. So I urge you to get that book. The next major issue is about dispute resolution. I talked about that a little bit earlier, and there are 3 aspects of how to resolve a dispute. Hopefully, you will never have one, but let me tell you, if you do, it is very expensive to resolve a dispute. And the expense comes from a couple of different sources. For one, you're going to anger your customer, and that could be a major cost of a dispute. But in addition, the fees and costs of resolving a dispute will increase incrementally if those disputes are not resolved in a way that is simple and convenient for you. And let me talk about the 3 aspects of it. First, there's an aspect of which law will apply. Now, for those of us who do business in the United States, we know that virtually the law is the same in virtually every state, because all the states have adopted the Uniform Commercial Code. And so if you make a sale from Arkansas to Texas or even California, then the law is probably going to be about the same regarding that commercial transaction. But that's not the case when you go abroad. And there are 2 other sources of law which will increase your costs pretty substantially. The first is a United Nations treaty. It's called the Convention on Sale of Goods. And although it has some aspects that are very similar to the Uniform Commercial Code, it's not the same. And there are some presumptions that are flipped in the United Nations Convention. So if you are transacting business between companies in which both countries are parties to this treaty, then it's going to apply more than likely. But that's not always the case, because we always don't transact business with companies who are resident in a state that is a party to this United Nations transaction. So what that means is that the law of a foreign country may apply. Well, the first thing that's going to mean to you is it's going to be a lot more expensive for you to figure out what that law is and what your rights and obligations are under that law. And second, unfortunately, the laws of some countries are not unbiased, and the court system may not be unbiased. And so the additional cost may still result in a prejudice forum and a prejudice decision. The second aspect is, where is the dispute going to be resolved? For Arkansas exporters, the cheapest place is going to be in Arkansas because it's a lot more convenient for you to get your witnesses and your lawyer located here and find a courthouse that's within driving distance. But if you don't specify Arkansas, then where are you going to specify? Many foreign customers don't want to specify the United States, or particularly Arkansas, but they want to specify their own country as the place where disputes will be resolved. And if you find that country to be fair and honest, then that may be okay, even though it may cost you a lot more to have a dispute resolved in that country. Sometimes the parties agree that a neutral country is where the dispute will be resolved. Once again, it is going to be a lot more expensive for you to travel to Switzerland or Sweden, for instance, to resolve a dispute than it would be to travel within Arkansas. And finally, there's the aspect of what method will you use, and there is debate about whether arbitration or litigation are better. I have found that arbitration is probably a quicker method, even though it may not be any cheaper than litigation. But that's something for you to decide with your attorney when you're setting up your contract. The next category of things that you should consider putting in your contract are what I call the helpful terms. The first is about warranty. You know, what happens if it breaks? Are you going to replace the product? And if duties have already been paid on it abroad, then who's going to refund those duties, or you have to just throw it away? What about service? Who is responsible for service? Or are you selling the product without any warranty and without any service? And of course, that can affect your sales. Next is indemnification. What happens if somebody gets hurt from using your product, whether they're hurt or just claim to be hurt? You know, whose fault is it, and who's going to pay the costs of that? Next, we talk about something that people are concerned about quite a bit, and that is intellectual property. And we've found that in some countries, there's just very little chance of protecting your intellectual property. Some companies deal with that by not selling their most up-to-date and technologically advanced product. Some simply take the risk. Some choose to only deal with very highly reputable companies, so that so they can be fairly assured that the intellectual property will be properly used. But in any event, that requires quite a bit of thought and is a huge risk when you're selling a product abroad that requires technical sophistication. 4 other categories of issues that you may want to consider in your contract. One is confidentiality. You want the other party to agree that they're not going to discuss anything about your contract or about your product. Are you going to allow your buyer to compete with you, or are they going to agree not to compete with you? Are they going to agree not to solicit your own employees so that they can go into business against you much more easily? And are they going to agree not to divert your products into some other territory that you may have given exclusive or limited rights to deal to some other buyer or distributor. So those are all terms that you should consider whether they are important to you in preparing your contract. Now, for distribution agreements, there are two different categories of things for you to consider if you decide to use a distributor. The first category are things that are the distributor's duties, and those are things like a minimum inventory, minimum marketing expenses that you may want the distributor to be obligated to spend, whether they have a marketing manager to focus on your product so that your product doesn't just get lost in the jungle of other products the distributor sells, whether the distributor will sell under special promotions from time to time, whether you will impose a sales goal or requirement on that distributor so that if he doesn't meet that goal, then you can terminate the distribution agreement and go somewhere else, whether the distributor will not sell competing products so that you know that your product will be the only one that that distributor sells of that particular type. Back to no diversion, and then a limited territory. The distributor, of course, will want unlimited territory, but you may choose to limit the territory or not have any restriction at all. Then the second category under distribution agreements is what is the producer? What are you going to agree to do? Well, are you going to provide terms, or is the distributor going to pay you cash up front? What about translated marketing materials? That's a common request from a distributor of the producer. Labeling under the laws of the local jurisdiction and in the language of the buyer. Taste and other customer profiles occurs sometime, particularly with food products, that the distributor may want the producer to conduct tests and then modify the taste or the appearance of the product in order to better sell it in a particular location. Trademark registration, that helps both the producer as well as the distributor. Will the producer contribute to a distributor's marketing expenses and provide other advice in an exclusive territory? Now, all those don't always come up, but you should be aware and be prepared for the distributor to ask you about each of these. And so I would suggest have an answer ready before you start discussing distribution agreements. Of course, those are not the only contracts to understand. Financing and letters of credit are important and can be complicated, particularly because they have words of art that often we're not familiar with. And so it's very important to make sure that the financing terms and the letters of credit are completely understood by us so that we understand them. And transportation, of course, is another complicated issue because they have both exclusions and coverage that we need to understand, and that's in the contract. And so that's a separate contract that I urge you to pay attention with. Now, for those of you who do not now have a comprehensive sales contract, I urge you to look at the website for the International Chamber of Commerce, because it has a list of proposed contract forms that you can purchase from the Chamber of Commerce that are quite good. And one has to do with sale of goods, another is a distributor agreement, and as I say, there are 4 or 5 contracts that you may want to use, but this is a place for you to go to try to find a form that, even if you don't use the exact form, it may help you understand better what the issues are when you're preparing your own contract. Now let's get into United States rules, because there are U.S. rules on an exporter that can affect your exports. And the first category are economic sanctions. And these are under the Office of Financial Asset Control. And these sanctions can be against persons and countries. I was in Cuba last week and dealing with the OFAC regulations for that country. It can apply to boycotts, anti-dumping rules, anti-terrorism rules, and of course, money laundering rules. And these sanctions and rules are very serious, and they do limit our ability to sell products in certain countries and to certain persons. And you should be aware of them. Even if it's a simple item, you still may be prohibited from selling it in a certain country. Then there are controls under our regulations, both for products that have a military basis under ITAR and those that are not military but still are regulated under the Export Administration regulations. I mentioned earlier about corrupt practices, and I talked about bribes. And as you probably are aware, in some countries, it is very common to provide gifts to your buyer or to people that are engaged in the transaction. And that may or may not violate local law. And even if it violates local law, you may hear from local people that, well, everybody does it, and so we're just going to close our eyes to it. The danger comes up when you may violate the U.S. law, because if your transaction violates U.S. law, then it's not just a violation of the local law, but it can also be a violation of the United States law. And that's very serious, because even when you're safely back home in Arkansas, the FBI can come ask you about that transaction and ask, why did you make this transfer to someone? Now, not all transfers are corrupt. Our Foreign Corrupt Practices Act allows certain very minimal gifts to be made in certain cases. I won't go through those cases, but there are some exemptions for it. But the big transactions where you'll see in the newspaper companies are getting caught for making bribes or indirectly providing some benefit to a buyer are serious. And even if the United States government does not impose a criminal penalty resulting in jail, the civil fines can be pretty great. Let me talk about a way where you can inadvertently get caught up in that. And that is that the U.S. law prohibits you making a transfer to a foreign government directly or indirectly. And so what if you're selling to a private company that is wholly owned by a foreign government? Well, that can violate the law. And that happens more frequently than what we'd like. So if a transfer or gift or anything becomes important to your sale, I suggest that you look at that very hard before you go forward with it. In addition to the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, we also have the United Nations Convention Against Corruption that applies around the world. Then there are some other U.S. laws which can affect the export of goods. Employment laws, environmental laws, trade laws, of course, tax laws, and antitrust laws. With many countries, we have treaties, and that helps us determine what the rules are and what the tax rates are with respect to doing business with a particular country. So you have to look at the treaty between the United States and that country if you're doing business with a foreign country. Now, if you turn the page away from U.S. laws, you're not totally safe by avoiding foreign laws. Now, even if you sell X works, you may think, well, I don't have to worry about that. But you really do, because if your customer or if your products do not satisfy the foreign regulations, then it may cause you problems or may limit your sales in the future. So you need to have some awareness of what regulations will be imposed by the foreign government so that you can make sure that the transaction will go smoothly. You should also be aware that if you are going to deliver into that country and not sell with the risk of loss and the title transferring in the United States, then of course you may be also subject to these rules yourself. And to read through the list, it's customs clearance, trademark protection, getting import licenses, labeling, consumer product health and safety, which in some countries is more strict than the United States, the product and quality standards, and some countries will require a warranty and certain specifications that the United States does not require. So that is a checklist of some of the foreign regulations with which you should be aware. Finally, there's a lot of talk, particularly before 2025, about free trade agreements. And these are agreements between countries based on treaties which reduce or eliminate customs duties, allow us to agree on product standards, help reduce documentation, allow selling to the government, allow service companies to supply their services, and permit fair treatment for investors. We have had 20 free trade agreements that covered 47% of the goods exported from the United States. Now, these are a little bit in question right now because the tariff issue has been imposed on top of these free trade agreements, and it affects some, but not all. Let me give you an example. One of our first free trade agreements was called NAFTA, and it was a treaty between Canada, the United States, and Mexico for virtually the free trade of goods and services among those three countries. You, I'm sure, have heard that now we have tariffs against Canada and Mexico. But those tariffs so far are honoring the goods and services that would otherwise pass under the free trade agreement between the United States and Canada, and that covers about 85% of the goods. So right today, those tariffs are only covering about 15% of the goods that are sold between the United States and Canada, although that could change. But the purpose of a free trade agreement is to eliminate or greatly reduce the customs duties between the countries and provide these other benefits that are all being rethought at this point. And as I say, there's also some political issues behind free trade agreements. Some say that free trade is not politically acceptable today because it has resulted in the loss of American jobs into other countries. And so for that reason, even though the United States consumer may have benefited to some extent by having cheaper prices, it has been to our detriment because we've lost that manufacturing ability. So that political debate continues to exist. I hope this has been a summary for you. I've tried to leave 15 minutes for easy questions. And as I say, you're welcome to email me at any time. And if I can't do it, I'll ask Rudy or one of the other deck members who are smarter than I am. And I hope it will be of some benefit to you.
Graham, you are just a wealth of knowledge, and I don't know how you can make scary situations like this entertaining but yet comforting at the same time.
Well, I try to scare you. It's good for business.
But I mean that does bring up a good point. You know, exporting, if you're not used to doing it and you're new to it, it can be extremely scary. And you know, you really don't know where to start. But you know, bringing someone in like Graham or Rudy or somebody with the experience as a partner can really be beneficial and you know keep you out of handcuffs even if it's unintentional.
Well, the best way, Jonathan, in my view, is for people to get started slowly, possibly with a sale to Canada or Mexico under products that are still exempt from duties, and make mistakes. And don't worry about making mistakes because we all do.
Yeah, I think you know the point that both Jonathan and you have made is that I mean it definitely can be scary if you're just diving into it without looking to see what possibly could go wrong. And that's the reason that we put on these webinars is to try to provide information. So the old saying about you don't know what you don't know, right? But if you come to these webinars at the very least, it will put on your radar that there are these possible issues that you need to consider, and then depending on what the nature of the issue is, you can contact Graham or myself or others in the deck to give you some more insight into those issues. But it isn't black magic. Thousands and thousands of companies and hundreds of thousands of companies worldwide export and import. So obviously, it can be done. The old saying about if what one man can do, another can do, if you get the right guidance.
And Heidi, I'm assuming you're going to send out my slides to everybody?
Yes, sir. We will be
Good.
sending out your
You're
slides.
welcome. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, and for those of you that perhaps are new to attending our webinar series, we put all these webinars on our deck YouTube channel, and so they go back quite a bit, I think, at least 4 years, I believe. But in any case, we have lots and lots of webinars that if for whatever reason you're not able to attend one of our webinars, you can always go back and take a look at them there and look at maybe other topics that we're not covering this time around. So don't be afraid, don't be concerned, and don't not export or import just because you haven't done it before. We're here to help you.
And by the way, I see a comment from somebody who said, and I did say it, that
Yeah, you did.
Incoterms address title. You're exactly right. They do not. That's an error in my presentation.
Yeah, actually, I think you addressed it, and it may actually have been at the same time that they were putting this information on board, but you actually did address it, Graham.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, guys. Jonathan or Heidi, do you have
Yep.
anything else?
No, just want to thank everybody for taking time out of their day to attend our webinar. Like I said, countless times, you know, we're here to help. So just reach out to us any way that you can. And also, I want to again thank Arkansas Manufacturing Solutions and Arkansas Workforce Connections for their support and allowing us to put these webinars on.
Jonathan, just a couple more things. Miss Heidi, could you put up a slide number 8? I don't think we've done that
Yes,
yet.
sir.
If you'll put that
But
up,
we have not done our.
these are some additional resources that you can access. As it turns out, we're blessed here in certainly in the United States and in Arkansas that we have lots of partners that can provide guidance as well. And if you will take a look at that slide,
Uh,
are you able to get to number 8?
I'm sorry, my computer is messing up.
Oh, no
Just one
worries.
moment,
Yeah,
please.
and we're going to send all the slide decks, and so it should be there. But there's lots of sources of information in addition to the District Export Council, and also when Miss Heidi's computer starts behaving.
There we go.
Oh, there it is. You might
There.
actually take a phone photo of that so that you'll have some information about International Trade Administration, the World Trade Center, which is here in Arkansas in Rogers, and several other sources of information that you can tap into. And if you still have questions, Ms. Heidi, could you go to the last slide that has our contact information?
Okay. Oh, I am so sorry. What happened?
It's okay. You know what? They're just going to have to show up to the next webinar and get it all
Oh,
found.
there it is.
Oh,
There it
there it
is.
is.
Anyway, so there's our email information. If you wish to contact Graham or myself or Jonathan or Miss Heidi, feel free to do so, and we will get you to the resource that can assist you. And I think with that, Jonathan, I think we will
Mhm.
call it a session, and we will have the next webinar is not, let me see, it's December the 3rd, I think.
Yes, sir.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
And
Okay.
I put the link in the chat.
Perfect. Perfect. All right,
Awesome.
guys.
All
Thank
right.
you so
Thanks,
much.
everyone.